Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Thursday at 7 a.m. A little bit of a late start for me today, but I'm up, ready to get the day going, and yeah, let's have a good day. So KO Coliseum is out, by the way. I managed to play 3 normal games. Of those, I think the most exciting one for me was I managed to win with 6 Sorcerer, 4 Supreme Cells, Kennen Hero Augment. Made Kennen Hero Augment work decently well. Kennen 3, Swain 3, kind of the big anchor points of that comp. And I made him Kennen 4 on 5-2 with that power up. And that was a good game. So Kennen can definitely do work. What I'll tell you is Kennen needs a lot of mana, so I actually had to go Ginsu and Shojin to make him work. And then I got Water Lotus, which really helped. So anyway, hopefully you guys are having fun. Certainly everyone's got their read on the meta. I know the team is already looking at some things. Who knows? Maybe there's a patch coming already. Who knows? So, I mean, I do know, but but yeah, so good stuff though. Hopefully you guys are having fun. Definitely, I think one of the things that's really big in this set's favor is the fact there is just so much content that like people are going to be discovering combinations and things as they go. I know there's a Viego power up that everyone has like figured out might be bugged or something, but like who knows how many more hidden gems there are to find in this set, because there are a lot of combinations. Yeah. Also started getting the initial batch of things like augment stats and stuff like that and seeing where those are playing out. Some of it will surprise you, some of it won't, so yeah, Protagonist is a very good augment. Shocker. Hero augments are fun though, so that's cool. But yeah. All right. Let's see. On my end today, a couple meetings. My first big deliverable for the new project, I'm turning in today. So we'll see how that deliverable lands. I think it turned out well though. So that's a big deal for me. But like I said, I think it turned out well enough that it'll be no issue. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe someone will come back and go, that's it? That's all you did? I don't know. But yeah, good stuff. All right. You guys have questions? All right. I wrote down a bunch of them today. Okay. The first one was a weird question. Pretty interesting one. A couple of days ago, we were talking about accessibility in video games, things like Super Guide in Nintendo games or various other, accessibility options that you could do, Talker's Trials, et cetera, et cetera. So the question was, what's your opinion on a system where the game adapts to players' needs, whether it be through like AI or some other system that the game could recognize your skill level and your needs and adapt based on that? So this is a really interesting question, but the more I thought about this, because I thought about it a little bit last night, the more I'm pretty sure the answer is this is a terrible idea. But maybe not for the reason you think, right? Because the idea of a game having difficulty that matches the player for accessibility, in theory, sounds great. It really does, right? But the problem is, my belief here is that video games are set up like a goal or a thing to achieve, right? Like an obstacle in your way, something that somebody sets in front of you, a challenge. That's a better word. Video games are a challenge. And even, when they're not actually a challenge, they are still a thing to overcome. That's why even challenge might not be the right word, right? Like let's take Donkey Kong as the example here, right? The challenge of the level is to complete, find X bananas or beat the boss or whatever, okay? And I believe that if that challenge has a variable level of success criteria, the meaning of achieving that challenge goes down significantly. And what I mean by that is like, you ever see those games where someone figures out like, hey, I can manipulate the AI? Like, if you stand in this one spot and, just attack, the boss can't hit you. And that's fine, but it sort of creates this moment where it's like, hey, the challenge is no longer there, okay? But it's sort of a clear indicator that like, well, yeah, you used this sort of cheat to get through it. And if you can do that with the AI, right, there becomes some incentives where like, actually what you're supposed to do is, instead of trying to overcome this hard boss, pretend you're terrible for a while, and then the boss will adjust and then you can beat it, which is like, kind of changes the incentives of how you can complete it. Now, the difference here with like a Mario Super Guide is that it's a very clear indicator of like, this is too hard for me. I'm going to press the button and make it easy mode. But in my mind, I know I completed the obstacle in easy mode, right? But as soon as that's abstracted, you're just sort of like, well, yeah, I beat the boss. Well, yeah, but so did I. Yeah, but you were less normal. Like, it wouldn't have a clear indication. And hilariously enough, there's actually a game that you can compare this to. Kid Icarus for the 3DS actually had a pretty variable system where you could set the difficulty anywhere from 1.0 to 9.9. Yeah, and you could go like pretty extreme. Like here, you could say it's like 8.3 or 7.6. And that difficulty would adjust things. But the reality is, much like the way players joke about TFT balance, the only numbers that were sort of mattered were like, did you beat it over 3.0, which was what they determined as normal, and did you beat it at 9, the hardest level, right? Like, players don't want an abstract slider that ruins the meaning of overcoming the challenge. And so, believe it or not, I think there are probably games that already do this to some extent, right? Where it's like, you die to a boss 3 times, and maybe the boss will start to swing their attacks a little bit less and stuff like that. But as soon as you realize it, kind of like hidden rules in TFT, it will ruin the illusion that you completed the challenge. And so I think that would actually end up doing more harm than good to the sense of completing the challenge that video games can often provide. That's sort of my read. And there's probably someone smarter than me that could talk about this in terms of like human psychology and what it takes to like overcome accomplishments and having a clear sense of accomplishment given the task presented in front of you. Right? There's probably some like study out there that's like, when humans complete a clear task and get a reward for it, they're more motivated to complete the task or something like that. And again, this is one of the drawbacks of me not being that educated. But like I said, you could probably find some sort of research paper out there, I would bet, that sort of backs this up. But again, just what I know off of players, that abstraction would, I think, do more harm than good to the sense of completing the challenge. And I think things like Elden Ring do this a little bit better, where Elden Ring certainly has options to make something easier, but they present it in a way where you feel clever for figuring out how to make it easier for yourself, right? Through weapon builds or items or setups or whatever. But you get to feel clever because you did it, as opposed to, did I beat that boss because the game made it easier for me? And I think that is a big difference. So yeah, overall, I would say probably not the best idea. But who knows? I'm sure there's a tech bro trying to sell it right now. So there you go. Okay. During set 14, we released the item reworks. And I said, well, it was because of set 15. And the question was, what was the reasoning for set 14? So the item changes were part of Roles Revamped. When we first started the Roles Revamped project, we laid out all the changes we'd be making. The changes to like ADAP, mana regen, the roles, the mana generation system, aggro, stuff like that, was all laid out in a proposal. In that proposal were all the item changes. And the very first version of this proposal changed a lot of items. And I mean a lot. I want to say like 20 to 25 items, maybe. It might be 18. The point is, it was a lot of items, okay? And one of the things that might surprise you to find out is that a lot of the item changes in the original proposal actually like radically changed the items, right? Like Ginsu's became a completely different item. Titanic Hydra, I remember, was in the proposal somewhere. Maybe it replaced Sterix. I can't remember. But like, this was like, man, we are going to completely rework the item system. And I want to say there were like 5 to 10 new items. Like we'd replaced Blue Buff with something else. And when I first looked at this proposal, from a purely mechanical standpoint, I agreed with it, right? Like it's solving a lot of problems. It's doing a lot of good stuff. But I've talked a bunch about change aversion. The amount of changes to a core system that people have spent years learning was way too high. And so one of the big things that we took that proposal, and the next step was, how do we do a lot of these changes that we want to do without it feeling like so much change? So for example, like with Titanic Hydra, it was sort of like, well, is there a way to keep this as Sterix? Can we get a lot of the benefit we're looking for here that fits Roles Revamped without transforming it, right? Or in the case of Ginsu's, right, it was like, do we really gain a lot by changing this item to a new name? What if it just stays Ginsu's? And yes, it doesn't work like old Ginsu's, but it's still Ginsu's, it still operates the same. You know, the same with Blue Buff, right? Like we knew Blue Buff wasn't going to be about reducing your mana pool anymore. But is there a reason it needs to change from Blue Buff? Probably not, you know, and so we went through and did a pass and we lowered the amount of change quite a bit. Now, once we did that, it was still somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 items being changed, right? Like Giant Slayer, Blue Buff, Shojin, Ginsu's, etc., etc. And shipping a patch, a set, where 20 items change is a lot. It's a lot for even our most engaged players to just learn all at once. And so what we did then, so again, we had our first proposal for Roles Revamped with a bunch of item changes. We then simplified it down to, well, now it won't feel like quite so much change, but it is still a lot of total changes. So then the next thing is there a way to shrink the total number of changes all at once so that people have time to consume it and get used to it in small pieces? And the answer was yes, right? Like clearly, like Blue Buff couldn't change because Blue Buff was using the new mana regen system, so we couldn't ship that early. But what we did is we did a pass of all those items and we said, which ones can we ship early? And stuff like Ginsu's was a very clear example of like, oh yeah, we can just ship this and it'll be fine. Now, there's trade-offs here, right? Like shipping an item rework in the middle of a set can be a little weird, but the idea was that having a small change is much more consumable for our engaged players who are still playing. And then for the players who come back when it's a new set, yeah, there's still a lot of change, but they're kind of expecting it because it's like, okay, uh, it's been a while since I've played, things have changed, that makes sense. And the engaged players can create guides and explain it because they've been used to it for a while and they've been playing it. So when a new player comes back for a set and is like, whoa, Ginsu's changed. And then the engaged player says, well, yeah, but it's basically still the same item. You build it the same people. It's all good. And they go, oh, okay, cool. Right? Like, there's that saying, arm your advocates. Engaged players who play a lot of TFT are often our advocates. And so having them be used to half the item reworks early was a good strategy. So we shipped them out early. But again, all of this was meant to be sort of one coherent package of roles revamped and item rework for mono generation. And Ginsu's in particular was remade because, like, well, not everyone wants attack speed as much, right? Like, casters, we don't have to worry about casters wanting Ginsu's over something like Shojin, because Ginsu's generating more mana, Ginsu's versus blue buff, I think is the better comparison, because attack speed isn't as valuable as flat mana regen to a caster. And that's a good thing. So yeah, that was kind of the reasoning behind it and how it all got piecemealed. And what I'll say is I'm really, really happy with the amount of change we shipped. It's like things feel similar enough that you didn't have to relearn everything, but different enough that it's like, it's a new system. And I think that was the right balance to strike. I feel good about it. Obviously, and then the one big headache, which was Ginsu's, we got out of the way early. We avoided any thrashing, and it built us up some trust when it came time for the second batch of item reworks. And people were like, oh yeah, well, the last batch worked out, so I'm sure this one's fine. So overall, it was a good strategy. And if you take anything away from this, one of the things to think about here that maybe you're not familiar with is it's not just enough to have a good design. You also have to think about how players will be digesting that design, right? And in this case, it was, don't give them 20 changes to the item rework system all at once. Again, even if those item changes are good and the end result after those changes is good, doing all of that at once can be a big pill to swallow. And so oftentimes it's almost like marketing is not the right word, but the ability to set everything as this sort of like consumable package for players in a live service game is really important, Now, if you're working on a game that hasn't shipped yet, this isn't a problem. No one's learned anything. You just make the best system you can. But for a live service game, it's a bit different. So, yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of it. That was the reason we did it in 14, was to lower that quantity of change all at once. So there you go. All right. Next week I am heading to LA. And I mentioned a leadership meeting, and someone asked the question of this leadership meeting was about me and how I'd get used at Riot in the future, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously I can't tell you everything here, but the short answer is no, this has nothing to do with me. If you've ever worked in a corporate environment, and this will sound familiar, but maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, something that happens in corporate environments is team building stuff that people believe makes the corporate work environment better. This could be a trust building exercise with you and your team, where you go off somewhere and hire some specialist to talk about building trust to the team, and everyone talks about it. And, there are whole businesses that are run around going to other businesses and teaching them how to operate as a team better and stuff like this. I'm sure there's a name for these, but I always call them these sort of like corporate team building exercises. And I'll also say I despise them. I find them an absolute waste of time. I feel like I learn nothing on them. But not everyone's like that. A lot of people actually enjoy them, or they find that it helps them grow as a leader, right? Like, how do you train new leaders? Well, you have to invest in them and train them. And so Maybe you'll have like a leadership training offsite where everyone goes and talks about leadership. Or, if you have a 2,000 person company, how do you make sure everyone is aligned to the goals of the company? Well, maybe you do a big offsite where you talk about, hey guys, this is where our company's going the next 3 years. And you guys are the leaders. And so here's what we're going to talk about. And so then if anyone asks you questions, because we just had this big meeting to align everybody. Cool. Right? So there's a bunch of reasons these kind of corporate meetings can happen. But it's just a common thing that happens, And like I said, for me, I sometimes am like, oh goody, -2 days. Yay. I'm trying to think, and I'll be honest, I've been doing this 20 years, and for me personally, I don't think I can think of one of these I've really enjoyed, but they exist. That's kind of what this meeting is. This meeting is a lot of the high-level leaders at Riot across all teams. So I want you to imagine somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 400 people out of Riot's, I think Riot as a whole is at like 5,000 now or something, coming together and doing one of these corporate leadership meetings. So it will not be about a specific game. In fact, I'd be shocked if games are even talked about, but it's more about leadership and corporate jargon and all that jazz. So, but it is not optional. And so that's what I'll be doing. It has basically nothing to do with my individualness. The pessimistic version of me is like, if I didn't go to it, things would be fine, but I need to. So is what it is. But yeah, so that's what I'll be doing. And it's 3 days. So I fly down Monday. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is this thing. I fly back Friday. So 3-day trip. Even though I'll be down there, I actually won't go to the Riot campus. So a lot of the coworkers I just won't get to see, which kind of stinks. But yeah, so TLDR here is, yes, I'm talking about this leadership meeting. If that gets me in trouble, who cares? But it has nothing to do with anything relevant to y'all. So, yeah. All right. Next up. Artifacts in set 15, are you happy with them? So the answer, and again, I can't speak for the balance team here. The answer to me is about an 80 to 90% yes, and a somewhere around 10% pretty hard no. Personally, I think there are a couple variants that are a little too extreme. So, for example, do I think Blighted Jewel Malzahar is a problem? Nope, not even a little. I think that's totally fine. I think there are, Tim actually had a game he was really happy with last night where he had a triple Hull Crusher and he put him on Cassante and he had Cassante with the power up all out. And he ended up winning that game, and that was very fun. It's awesome. That's a cool use of artifacts. I am glad that exists, Most of the artifacts do not seem to cause a problem, and so I'm not too worried about it. There are probably, they really all boil down to one or two cases, but I believe plus range, we are back in a world where plus range is causing us a lot of problems. Melee champions, especially under roles revamped, plus range got worse on melee champions. And by worse, I mean more powerful and more impactful. Because before roles revamped, if you had a melee champion and you gave them plus range, you lost out on the opportunity to drain tank and generate mana through that. And so you could actually end up nerfing yourself quite a bit. Not the case this set, right? Champions like Gangplank, who have to be balanced around being fragile melee champions, so they get higher DPS and higher attack speed and things like that, will all of a sudden give a Gangplank a sniper's focus or two, and he's a beast, right? Yone is the most extreme version of this. I think Yone is already insanely strong. Give Yone an RFC or a Sniper's Focus, and he becomes like ungodly. And so I think plus range is actively doing bad things to the game right now, just in general on melee champions. And then the other one is that obviously I think the choice to have Gwen's range extend without compensation damage adjustments was not a great choice personally. I think if you look at an item, right, I always boil things down to numbers. Generally, an item is somewhere in the neighborhood of plus 50 to 70% damage. That's a core item, right? If you look at Death Cap, right, like Death Cap is 55 AP plus the 12 damage amp. That's around 70%, give or take, for an individual item. And I think artifacts get to be a little higher than that. But I think if you're ever crossing a single item, doubling your output, you've gone too far, right? Like, that's a pretty simple framework for item balance. Sniper's Focus much, much more than doubles Gwen's output. The fact that she goes from hitting 1 to 2 units to the entire board, you can literally get as high as like 6 or 7x the damage. And that's before you even take into account the ranged modifier that is, the Sniper's Focus actual ability. So that's that same deer from yesterday. So I think when you break that framework, that's not something I think is great for the game. Now there are solves, and I've actually shared at least one solve with Kent. Let me see. Oh, there it is. There's the deer. If you're looking on the screen right now, you can see the deer there. So now again, here's where we get to have that, balance versus fun discussion, because I'm sure there's at least one person who's listening to this and going, oh, well then now after roles revamped, you should get rid of plus range, right? And certainly it would be easier to balance, but it'd be a lot less fun. There's something fun about melee champions having plus range. And again, I'm not on the team, so nothing like this would happen. But I do think right now, the one change I would probably make pretty easily here is Call to Chaos should probably not give triple Sniper's Focus ever. If you're going to have that in the set, that's fine, but make it a lot harder to get than a single augment, especially a popular augment like Call to Chaos. I would probably just ditch that. That way, if you ever get 2 Sniper's Focus, it's like, oh, this is like a very high roll game, right? Where it's like I took Portable Forge and I got another artifact later or something. Like, great, let that exist, but probably don't have a single augment open up that space. That's a little scary to me. But again, these slight problems, do they go, well, now I'm unhappy with artifacts as a whole? No. Most artifacts are doing good things. They propel a champion, make them exciting. I've seen a Mundo with the locket be really, really tanky, and it's like, that's cool. Creating some of these moments, I think generally is fine. The other one, again, this is still plus range melee, but like Fishbone's Volibear, that's another one where it's like, that kit is literally designed to swap targets, and so I'm pretty sure Fishbones is more than doubling Volibear's damage. So, yeah. But, other than that, that's one of the challenges of artifacts, right? Is that artifacts are supposed to open up new positive potentials for carries. And so, like, if Fishbone's Volibear is truly a problem, fine. The team can deal with it. Is it actually a problem, or is it just kind of cool and exciting? That's the thing to figure out. Because I think the worst thing we could do is just, anytime an artifact is good on somebody, disable it. Like, that's a terrible idea. But yeah, if it were me and, gun to my head, the thing I would probably do is just remove the sniper's focus option from Call to Chaos for now. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So, just my 2 cents. But overall, otherwise, nothing too crazy. All right, we are at 30 minutes. I can't really get through the last question I had, so hopefully this will cover it for the day. Like I said, because I don't have hyper roll and I have time, I've been picking at normal games because I'll save my ranked climb for the weekend stream. That'll be fun. Like I said, there may or may not be a patch soon, so I'm sure that will shake things up a little bit. We'll have to see what those changes look like. But yeah, otherwise, again, I think the reality here is that this is the most exciting time in the set, right? And there's enough content and there's enough things that are fun that I'm sure people are playing lots of cool builds. I hope our numbers are looking good. I don't know, so here's hoping. But yeah, the team's definitely giving it their all though, right? I mean, the fact that the set launched yesterday and I know they're already looking at potential areas for improvement, it's a very good thing. That's why I always like TFT, right? Is if the game is not in a good state, you can trust the team will fix that very, very quickly. So, and hopefully after 6 years, we've earned that trust. So, all right, that's gonna do it for me. I'm gonna go find breakfast, turn on the work computer, and get started. So, all right, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.